Good afternoon, and welcome to this day's edition of the St. Mark Spark. We're coming to you every day, right now, Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock, whenever possible, and we're trying to do our best to be right on time with this. So if you don't see us right at 1, remember that these are also available once they premiere. You can go back to the video and go ahead and watch, as well as comment, and we'll be looking back at those comments to respond when we are able. So I have a question for you today. And I was thinking about this because yesterday I said the words for such a time as these or such a time as this. And I found myself saying this on a pretty frequent basis lately. And I sort of had forgotten where they came from. And so I looked it up. And these are words from the Book of Esther. I'm going to talk about the Book of Esther a little bit, but the question that I wanted to ask you is, have you ever been approached to join a conversation where someone says something like this? Do you have a place where you can talk privately? Do you have a few minutes to just be in conversation and focus on this conversation? And it's usually accompanied with, and you might want to find a place to sit down. Even, is there someone nearby that you can count on during this conversation? It's oftentimes during those conversations and after those conversations that our life takes a turn. Our life takes a turn in unexpected ways that can be sometimes devastating. I think about the times that we're in right now, and our lives have all taken a turn. The world, the virus has said, do you have a place to sit down? Do you have a quiet place where you can sit and talk about this? Do you have someone who you can lean on for this conversation? In the last few days, I've been very aware of the number of times that I use the words in the times such as these, or in the days such as these are. I think I used them yesterday with Pastor Dave in a conversation that we were having about the COVID virus and showing up to the church to videotape all of our worship services and many of our other communications. But I had forgotten, I think, where those words came from. And so I did look them up, and they are, at least in this instance, in the Book of Esther. A few weeks ago in the story, we did talk about the Book of Esther. And the story is basically one that we know. It's an easy book to read. It can be read in one setting. It's a pretty good narrative. But
King
basically,
Artaxerxes basically decides that his queen is not worthy of him anymore, and so he
decides that his wife, the queen, is no longer worthy of being his queen because of her actions. And so the king goes out and he searches through all of the kingdom, or has his people go search the kingdom for candidates to become his next wife. And they gather all up and they come to the palace. And for about 12 months, they are treated like princesses. Their hair is done, their outfits are changed and checked into, and they are bathed, and they live the life of a princess in some ways. And in other ways, it's more like a palace prison for princesses, because these princesses are not allowed to have any communication with the outside world. They're not allowed to leave. They do not have the freedom to do so because the king has chosen them to be there. And at some point, the princesses all get a chance to go before the king, and Esther does earn the favor of the king. She becomes the next queen. In a parallel story, there's a man named Haman who is in charge of the armies in the kingdom, and he has decided to wipe out the kingdom of the Jews, to wipe out all the Jewish people. Now, Queen Esther's cousin, Mordecai, who has taken her under his wing, has discovered this plot by Haman. And so he sends messages back and forth to Queen Esther and encourages her to go before the king and ask for him to do something about this plot, to squash it down, to save Israel. Now, it was a life or death sentence, actually a death sentence, to go before the king without being invited. And so what Mordecai was asking Esther to do was to put her life in definite peril. But she did it, and she went before the king, and the king loved her. So upon her revealing that she was part of the Jewish kingdom, the Israelite kingdom, he squashed the plot and he killed Haman, and Queen Esther saved her. She saved her people. And that's the story. Now, she came from a poor region. She had lost both of her parents to death. She was orphaned. Thus, Mordecai had taken her under his wing. And she was now living the life of the queen with all of those perks. And it could be easy for her or anyone to forget where they came from and what our purposes are in life if our station has changed and our circumstances have gotten so much better. In the life of selfies and self-attention, taking advantage just for our own self in these days, in this life where we've come to, it would be easy to focus just on Esther, for her to focus on herself. But Mordecai says these words. He says, "Who knows? But you have come to this place for such a time as this." And it sounds like an encouraging word, and it is, but I think that he was also maybe wagging his finger at his cousin and saying, "What are you doing? You need to speak up. You cannot be silent in this time. In this place that you've arrived, you have such an opportunity to do something big. You cannot be quiet." And on Sunday, Pastor Dave is going to talk about Palm Sunday and the stones that Jesus said would cry out, even if the crowd was silenced. So we need to cry out where there are injustices, to cry out to the world and say, even though we're sort of stuck, or you can look at it as an opportunity to be home within our four walls, we have an opportunity in such times as these to not curl up into a ball and wonder why this is happening, though that is valid. But we also have a great opportunity to reevaluate where we are in times such as these. Now, I've got a few questions for you to take a look at or to ponder over the next couple of days, if you would. If you were to look at your current life situation and apply the thinking, "Who knows, but you have come to a place for such a time as these," if you would apply that thinking to it, how would it change your thinking? What would you do differently? How would you react to your partner, your spouse? How would you react to your children or your boss, your coworkers? How would you react to your pastor, the grocery store clerk? You have come to this place for such a time as this. God's planning is never random. God's purpose for you and your life were set in place before you were born. We're reminded in Ephesians 1:4, "For God chose us before the creation of the world to be holy and to be blameless in God's sight." God created you for such a time as these. And as we heard the Douglases tell us in their family devotion yesterday, God knows the plans that God has for us. Plans to prosper us and not to harm us. Plans for a future. May you have peace this day. May you have hope this day. And may you understand or come to understand better what your purpose is in such a time as these. God bless you.